You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, and marriage. I'm Christina. This is Peter. We are continuing to talk through the CIPR approach to building websites. You just heard how we approach it from a conversion-based perspective and why we do that. And I thought we could spend some time just digging into our process. So, Kate, you've signed the contract. We're getting started. What's next?
Yeah, and I guess this is probably another area of strength for us. Processes. Christina's last name should be Process. Christina Process. She loves process, and she's really good at it. So, and it's important. I think probably more than any other type of digital or any actually marketing and communications initiative, probably when it comes to website development, process is maybe it is maybe most important when it comes to website development, because as Christina alluded to and said before, these are not simple projects. No. There's lots of pieces and there's lots of things that happen all at the same time. And so processes really, I think the difference between, a pleasant experience and one that's successful and gets done on time and in budget and in scope, and one that just sort of becomes a bit of a runaway. And anyways, yeah. So Christina, you're the process queen. So tell us a little bit about our process.
Yeah, I mean, it always shocks me when someone says to me like, oh, we've been building this website with someone for 2 years. And I'm like, why? What was the process? Right? Like just being able to process to me creates some really transparent, clear lines on expectations from a scope, timeline, and budget perspective. I mean, we approach building a website and the design of a website from a conversion-based perspective. And I would say we approach the development of a website from a very project management focused perspective. And I think that's another differentiator when it comes to the different types of web developers that are out there. I think there are some freelancers and sole proprietors that are very strong project managers, but you also have to understand that they're also the ones doing all the work.
Right.
And so when you're working with an agency like ours, you have a dedicated individual that is managing the project, and that project manager isn't just a project manager. They are intimately involved in the website development process. They have the abilities, they have the know-how, which I think is a differentiator. So I think sometimes you have the extreme on one end where you're trying to package developer, designer, project manager into one, and that's overwhelming. I've been there, that's overwhelming. And then I think you have this extreme opposite where you have a model where your key point person is a project manager, but just has no idea how to build a website. And I've been part of that, right? When I worked corporately, we worked with a fabulous design, see, I'm calling them a design agency. They weren't, they were a web development agency. And my project manager was not involved in development. Their kind of role was to keep me happy, which is nice. I got some great sushi lunches out of it. But he was a triage point, right? How's this going? And as a client who is knowledgeable in coding, is knowledgeable in a development process, to me, that held things up, because now he's going to someone else, and I probably could answer that question myself, and we're stuck. So I think there's this really nice piece from a process perspective where at CIPR, your project manager is knowledgeable in the whole thing, right. But there's also this ability for them to have the time to spend with you, to understand, to work with the development team, and to almost become this bridge in terms of communication, right? The client saying this, what does it really mean? How can I think critically and strategically about this from a conversion-based website perspective? Now I'm talking to my team. The team is facing these things. Okay, what does this mean based on the client goals? And how do I communicate this back to the client? And that's important. I think that from a process perspective, that flow and interconnectedness is a really key part of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously we follow a fairly, I guess, proven process that we've developed over time. And so do you want to maybe just spend a couple minutes just sort of laying out the different phases of our process, just to sort of give people a sense of, I guess, how we kind of take this elephant and eat it one bite at a time?
Yeah, so I mean, once you start, so we've talked about Asana before. Here's our plug. We need Asana as a sponsor to this podcast. But within Asana is, if the contract sign and you're starting that with us, we have that whole proven process in a template. So step one is going to that template. And basically that template now provides visibility to the client about everything that's going to happen and the sequence of events and what triggers what, which is nice from a visibility perspective. And my goal for website development, my team knows this, is I never want a client to come to us and ask in mid-development, what have you done? How long is this taking? And that process allows us to do that. Everyone has line of sight on dates and milestones and what's happening. So step one is a workshop. So I heavily believe in kind of including as many people, not I was going to say as possible, but that's crazy, as appropriate,
Should be included, yeah.
into this meeting. And that's okay if you have anyone who's going to be a level of approval on the site should be a part of this first workshop. Anyone who is the subject matter expert that's going to be feeding into content on certain pages, anyone who is going to be using that website as a key aspect of their daily work. So if you have an in-house social media person, obviously the website's going to be pretty instrumental into what they do. And so that website workshop for us is really about, one, uncovering your goals of not just your website, but your marketing program and your communications program, because your website is also a tool for your public relations and your brand awareness. Two, it's understanding what you like. Right. We joke internally about one of our favorite website workshops is when an individual told us that they didn't like triangles. Which we joke about, okay, fine, they didn't like triangles, so I'm going to stay away from triangles, or I don't like the color, the color green. And it's like, okay,
good to know up front, right?
So it's sussing out some of that stuff. And then it's also, we do this really interesting, everyone in the room pull up a website that they really love, and let's talk about it. And then vice versa, pull up one that you just, and we talk about it. And one, I think that helps people to start to understand this conversion-based piece, because a lot of the time people will pick something that they love and they hate, and their comments boil down to, this was easy to use and easy to figure out, and this one just felt really clunky and I didn't know where to go. And so it provides this really great opportunity for the whole team to start talking about user experience, which fundamentally is about conversion, right? So this pleasant user experience means that they're finding what they need and they're closing the loop and they're gone, right? Whereas a creative is more of that, I just really liked the look and feel of this. So that piece allows us to do that. Also at this workshop, this is where we start talking about access and really start to understand, we've used this term in this series already, are you being held hostage somewhere else? How much work do we need to do to get a URL back? How much work do you need to do to track down the password to a GoDaddy account that you haven't logged into? And I think that sometimes companies go like, why are you asking for this now? We're not launching our website for 2 or 3 months.
Because it might take us 2 to 3 months to get the answers we're looking for. And we want to be ready when we want to launch your website.
Or, obviously we use Google Data Studios. Google Analytics is something really important to us and should be to you on your website. And so that's part of that process. Okay, how are we linking the two? And we need that access right away. And sometimes people, it's like 4 employees removed that have access and ownership to Google accounts that were set up years ago. So exactly that. I was sitting on a client call where we haven't built their website. Another company did, and we're kind of working collaboratively with them on a few things. And they were sitting down to launch the website, and we were part of the call just from we're another contractor on the file. And And he says to the team, okay, like, what's your like GoDaddy login? Like, where is it hosted? And it's like, this website is, the meeting is to launch the website. Like, and nobody knew. Nobody knew. And nobody, like, where's the URL? Like, where are these things hosted? And they had a pretty tight timeline. They had some important deliverables, and keeping that, needed to be launched within that 24-hour time frame. And now this web developer, poor guy, is trying to chase down where these URLs are. So
his fault though. His fault. You should have asked that question months ago.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's why we start with that up front. So there's this really kind of heavy, and I think some people, depending on their personality, scratch their head and why we're starting there, but important. One of the big things I like to do, and everyone knows this about me, is sticky notes. There are virtual ways to do sticky notes too, but I like to do kind of the big content understanding. So on sticky notes, or just by sharing verbally, what are all the pieces of content that you need to have on the website? And, usually there's some pretty standard things, contact information, about information, but you start to understand different services. And this helps us start to build a sitemap, right? So I take all these stickies back, or all of these notes, and start to group them in. Okay, well, all of this would make sense under a services heading. And then you get to have this great conversation with them in terms of, okay, is every service equal? Does every service belong in a different category? I think about Westside Laser and Light. We built their website for them, and they have so many amazing services, but as a consumer, I don't know necessarily what this particular service means or does. All I know is I want services related to my face. And these are the services that are related to that. So it starts to help us categorize and understand and have conversations. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we talk about what's the functionality that you want your website to have. So do you want to be able to book online? Do you want people to be able to ask you questions? Is chat important, or reviews important? Is there a map of the site that needs to be seen? Is there photos? Do you have a lot of downloadables? So then you're going to marry the two, right? So these are your functionality pieces. These are your content pieces, and how do they go together? Then based on that, we have everything we need to start the process.
Right, up front. Yeah. Prior to even starting really any substantial work.
Yeah.
We have all of that. And I just want to interject at this point to say, doing all of this up front also gives the company some time to think about their business. Because really, if you're thinking about a website development process, it's really about, okay, how are we positioning our business? And it really forces you to think through your business and your business functions and what's important. And sometimes the process of web development causes companies to stop and think about things, and all of a sudden has people in a room together having conversations they've never had about this business function versus that one, and the priority of this versus the priority of that, right? So the nice thing about having all these conversations up front is that it gives the company some time to think through some of these things. Obviously, you have the high level conversation, we get what we need, and then it iterates from there, right? And things might change as we go, but at least we got some basic foundation in place, and it gives something from which the company can sort of have more internal dialogue about, how they really want to position, what is really important, what are their priorities, which is really important.
Yeah. So then two things happen on our side. We start to build the sitemap, but along with the sitemap, we do something called our content architecture. So basically what that is we take the sitemap and we start to map out underneath that what all the content needs are going to be on each page. And we also do a visual map at the same time. So I liked our conversation around the image of whatever it is, and how a creative focus and how a conversion focus thinks about that image. So we do the same thing up front in terms of mapping it to a sitemap. Okay, is that team photo most relevant on the homepage? Or are we putting that on an about page? Or are we putting that on a something else page? Or what images where? And we do that fairly early on, one, because usually the company realizes, oh man, we need more visuals. And then that causes a conversation around, are there places we can use stock? Are there things you have in your files that you're not thinking about? Do you need to go get a photo shoot done? Can we make graphics? What's that look like? And then from a content perspective, the same thing. Okay, we really need to think about this and how we're explaining it, where are resources there, and moving that way. Then into kind of in tandem to that piece, as we start building out content and finding imagery and doing that side as we're building mock-ups. So I think this surprises people a lot of the time that, you know, we're not a creative agency, obviously, but those mock-ups are important. I don't want to go into development and start spending time on moving something forward if you're not happy with the look and feel. And our mock-ups have conversion focus in mind, but they also have, okay, how are we bringing the brand story to life online? So that happens. For me, it's all about identifying really key pages and key templates. I want to show the client everything first, so that we're confident on that vision moving forward. And that's actually a critical milestone for us. There's some significant sign-offs that happen there before we move to the next phase. And the next phase is development. With our development phases, obviously the first phase is the longest. Our development team is working in there, building from scratch. And then we have our first stage of edits, which is all internal to us. So Karen, our web project manager, is going to take that fine-tooth comb and do a full sweep of edits. I managed the Quail Lodge web project, and my first round of edits was 30 or 40 pages of information. And we scrub that site before a client sees it. I don't want to waste your time.
Right.
Your time is so valuable. And as a client, and as I feel like as a human being, when there's like little goofy mistakes, your eye just goes there and you become obsessed with it. So I just think from that perspective, so key to just hone in on those things and get it as clean as possible. Back to development, now over to the client, back to development, back to us, back to development. So until we get it right, there's kind of this trade-off, but we are always in there first, right? So our development team is amazing, but as they're working, there's always going to be little things. So we're making sure we're ahead of the game. Then we get to launch, which is smooth because we've had all the access issues worked out, and then 30 days of support.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, our, you know, the development process is an iterative process, right? Because the developers are really just trying to take the vision and bring it to life. And, you know, the way we do it internally here is they bring concepts to us fairly early. And, you know, obviously they develop a bunch of it and then they bring it to us. And then, like you said, there's a lot of back and forth internally between us and our development team to sort of make sure we've accurately brought that vision to life, right? And it's sort of like, you know, we believe it sort of jives with the needs of the client, right? And so yeah, and so I mean, I guess the long and short of our process when it comes to website development is, first of all, there's a lot of steps that happen prior to ever a developer touching anything. And it's really important to do that because, you know, number one, for us as an agency, if we just like, you know, rush to development, it's going to cost a fortune, and it's not going to be a good outcome. And so you need to do all those things up front to make sure that by the time you get to the development phase, the development team has everything they need to just execute development, right? And then obviously there's a lot of those back and forths, that all that quality assurances and whatever edits. And then, yeah, and then we get sort of to a place where, you know, we're talking to you about it. We're really kind of doing the fine details and the, you know, obviously there's what you envisioned and then sort of how it comes out and making sure we've created good alignment between those two things. And there's those little things that need to be fixed. So it's a process, and it's not a simple process, but I think we've laid out a great process based on years of experience and best practices and things that we've seen work and don't work. And so I think we're very confident in our proven process.
Yeah, it's not a simple process, but it's a proven one.
There you go.
There you go.